I now call the open council meeting of Monday, October 26, 2020 to order and request that everyone turn their cell phones off for the duration of the meeting. We'll ask the acting clerk. I'll ask the acting clerk to take a council roll call and request all members respond verbally at this time and when voting on any matters this evening.
Thank you. Councillor Bush?
Present.
Councillor Carlucci?
Present.
Councillor Martin MacKinnon?
Present.
Councillor Shane MacKinnon?
Present.
Councillor McKay?
Present.
Councillor Price?
Present.
And Mayor Wilson?
Present.
Thank you.
I'd like to call for declaration of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act with respect to the agenda for this meeting.
Councillor McKay here.
Councillor McKay.
Yeah, item 7A.
All right.
And spouse to the owner.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to call for declaration of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act for meetings at which a member was not in attendance and which had not been previously been declared. Okay. We have no delegations this evening. We have no presentations. We have one public notice, which I'll ask the acting clerk to review.
Okay, tonight's public notice is to invite citizens to get involved in the city's 2021 budget process. Anyone wanting to provide input is asked to email budgetinput@dryden.ca or to mail their thoughts to the City of Dryden Budget Input at 30 Van Horn Avenue, Dryden, Ontario, P8N2A7.
We're now at Consent Agenda Part 1, General, and I'd like to ask the acting clerk to conduct this section of the agenda.
Okay, as usual, I'll review the items that are listed under Consent Agenda Part 1, and when I'm done, I will ask if there are any items members of council would like to speak to or sever for a separate vote. Under Adopt Received Minutes this evening, we have the minutes of the Northwestern Health Unit Board meetings that were held June 26th and August 28th to be received, as well as the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held September 14th and the Council meeting held September 30th to be adopted. Under motions arising from previous meetings, we have a motion to approve a CIP application for the property located at 20 King Street, and a motion to approve a Section 357 cancellation, reduction, refund of taxes request. Are there any of these items that any member of council would like to speak to and or sever for a separate vote? Okay, seeing none. In that case, I will ask for someone to move and second the Consent Agenda Part 1 motion. Councillor Carlucci and Councillor Bush. Moved by Councillor Carlucci, seconded by Councillor Bush, that council hereby consider the following items of the Consent Agenda Part 1 General under the date of October 26, 2020 as read and adopted. 6A, B, C, D, 7A, and B.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're now at Consent Agenda Part 2, Bylaws, and I'd like to ask the acting clerk to conduct this section of the agenda.
Okay, again, I'll review the items shown under Consent Agenda Part 2, and when I'm done, I will ask if there are any items that a member of council would like to speak to and or sever for a separate vote. This evening we have 5 bylaws in the consent agenda. Bylaw 4772-2020 is a bylaw to authorize the execution of an amendment to a joint use agreement between the City of Dryden and the Dryden Youth Soccer Association for the use of the multi-use building located at 280 Weiss Road. Bylaw 4776-2020 is a bylaw to amend the city's zoning bylaw to add the residential type 1 exception 1 zone under section 4.13 and to rezone the lands located at 163 Mary Avenue from the residential type 1 zone to the residential type 1 exception zone. Bylaw 4777-2020 amends Chapter 72 of the city's municipal code by amending the schedules to reflect the fees and charges to be charged effective January 1, 2021. Bylaw 4778-2020 is a bylaw to authorize the execution of a lease agreement between the City of Dryden and Provincial Helicopters Limited for approximately 1,750 square meters of land located at the Dryden Regional Airport. Bylaw 4779-2020 is a bylaw to establish and regulate the fire department for the city of Dryden, and bylaw 4781-2020 is a bylaw to amend the capital plan of the city's 2020 budget by removing the surface treated road capital rehab project and replacing it with replacing the Swanson Street water mains. Are there any of those items that any member of council would like to speak to or have cited for a separate vote? Okay. Again, seeing none, I would ask for someone to move and second the consent agenda part 2 motion. Councillor Shane MacKinnon and Councillor Martin MacKinnon. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Shane MacKinnon, seconded by Councillor Martin MacKinnon. The council consider section 10 of the consent agenda part 2 bylaws under dated October 26, 2020, which includes the following bylaws as read first, second, and third time. Bylaw 4772-2020, bylaw 4776-2020, bylaw 4777-2020, bylaw 4778-2020, bylaw 4779-2020, and bylaw 4781-2020.
All in favor? All right, carried, thank you. We are now back to the regular agenda, which is out of consent. Each item on the regular agenda will be presented individually to council. I'll ask Mr. Lansdale-Roll to present his staff report.
Good evening, everyone. So my first staff report is basically the exact same staff that I delivered earlier this month at Cal, with the corrections to the agreement that Councillor Shane MacKinnon brought up. So it's very clearly defined now in section 1.1.4 and 2.6 that it's 50% of the municipal accommodation tax revenues that we will be sharing with the Chamber of Commerce. So those corrections or clarity is now reflected in the agreement. So I'm hopeful that there's no other questions on the agreement this evening, and that council will be able to pass the bylaw.
All right, no questions. Clerk, someone to move and second?
Yes, could I have someone move and second? Councillor Price? Anybody else? Oh, Councillor Carlucci, thank you. Moved by Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Carlucci, that bylaw 4780-2020 being a bylaw to authorize the execution of an agreement between the Dryden District Chamber of Commerce and the Corporation of the City of Dryden for the sharing of the revenues from the City of Dryden Transient Tax Dryden Transient Accommodation Tax be read a first, second, and third time.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Second staff report?
All right. My second staff report this evening relates to the reserve fund policy amendment that I presented at Cal early this month. And based on the direction from council, my staff report reflects the change on the Waterworks Reserve Fund target to reflect 100% of the water own source revenue. And the only other amendment to the policy is changing what was called the Hydro Reserve Fund to be the Legacy Reserve Fund. So I believe that there's a bylaw to amend the corporation's corporate policy and procedure manual reflecting this amended policy.
Okay. So, first and seconder?
Everyone's in favor?
Yeah. Oh, questions?
No,
Oh, okay, first and second, okay.
Councillor Bush and Carlucci, thank you. Moved by Councillor Bush, seconded by Councillor Carlucci, the bylaw 4782-2020 being a bylaw to amend bylaw 3529-2009, bylaw to adopt the City of Dryden Corporate Policy and Procedure Manual by deleting and replacing following policy under section finance. Policy FIR01, reserves and reserve funds policy, be read for a second and third time.
All in favor? No opposition? Carried, thank you. All right, and your report, Q3 financial report, Stephen.
Okay, my last staff report this evening is a Q3 financial report. This provides council with financial information as at September 30th, 2020. As you can see in the report, our operating revenues are lower than expected as of Q3. Our operating expenditures are significantly under as at Q3. So I'm just going to go into a few of the highlights with regards to those items first. So year to date on the revenue side, we're approximately $600,000 negative or under budgeted levels. This is directly related to the COVID pandemic and our facility closure. So our other user fee revenue is approximately $325,000 lower than budget. Also along the same lines with regards to the pandemic is the municipal accommodation tax revenue, our investment interest, and also our accounts receivable and tax interest and penalty revenue are lower than anticipated due to the waiving of interest and penalties from April 1st to the end of June. Our fine revenue is also lower than budget year to date. This is related to the provincial offenses, office closures, and court closures, primarily related to the court. In speaking with the management of provincial offenses office, it's not that our actual tickets are down, it's that with court being suspended, none of these tickets have been processed. So it's not that it's not that I anticipate these revenues being down, it's just that we haven't collected them yet. With court opening up last week being virtual, I think they're opening it up to individuals who are pleading guilty. So we anticipate that fine revenue will be beginning to pick up once again here in the fourth quarter. And we also had some land sale revenue being under anticipated level, but that would be fully offset by a positive variance on the transfer to reserve. So that gives you an idea of our revenues year to date. With regards to expenses, as of Q3, we were almost $2.3 million underspent. And again, a lot of this has to do with the pandemic and facility closures and other mitigating measures that the city took to bring our expenses in line with our reduced revenues. Some of the positive variances do relate to timing of activity, but I won't go into too much of those details right now. But there are some permanent, or not permanent, but cost savings that do not relate to the pandemic that we will see positive variances at the end of the year. And those relate to staff vacancies. We had vacancies throughout many departments throughout 2020. We still continue to this day have a handful of vacant positions, but recruitment is well underway. And then with the COVID pandemic and travel restrictions, we're going to be significantly underspent on our travel and training budget areas as well. So before I move on, are there any questions related to the revenues or expenses in our operations?
Your Worship.
Councillor Bush?
Through the chair. Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Just a question on the POA offenses and tickets, etc. This backlog that's there, does Adrian expect to pick up most of that or a portion of that going forward, or how does that factor into your forecast to the balance of the year and then into 2021?
So we're hoping that in Q4 a lot of the backlog is addressed, but I don't anticipate that it would be fully addressed, Councillor Bush. So we'll probably do an estimate and approve the fine revenues that relate to 2020. Because there is going to be a little bit of 2020 related fines, but we do not collect until 2021. So we will approve for those.
Okay, so from a budgeting and a forecast perspective, are you forecasting between the 2 years to make up the whole difference or a portion of the difference?
I'm budgeting and forecast to be on budget for both years.
Okay, thank you.
So moving forward on that topic of the forecast, we're forecasting to year-end 2020, we are forecasting quite a bit significant operating surplus, right around $950,000. So we can probably summarize this with two comments. Number one, the lost revenue or the negative variances in revenue are going to be pretty much fully offset by our safe restart funding that we're going to receive from the provincial government. Then you look at the expenditures, and our expenses are going to be under the 950K, or they're 800K, but I mean, it's all really related to do with staffing. Our bottom line is going to be, the surplus is going to be related to the staff savings with regards to the facility closures, as well as to the vacancies. And we did have quite a few vacancies throughout the year, so that's not an insignificant amount of money. And then there's some pluses or minuses built in there. But really, our lost revenue is made up by the safe restart money, and then our surplus really comes down to those vacancies and the measures that the city took when we closed down certain facilities. So before I move on, I'll ask if there's any questions related to the forecast.
Your Worship.
Yes, Councillor Bush.
Through your worship. So Stephen, this $950,000 forecast surplus to this point, I mean, we're really sort of mid-pandemic, I would suggest. We still have a lot of uncertainty heading into 2021. And I know that you're sort of maybe midway or third way through the budgeting process, pulling things together, but this surplus for 2021, what's your view on rolling that into, or 2020 rolling it into 2021, given that we're mid-pandemic?
Yeah, so, we received approximately $450,000 of safe restart money in 2020. As you can see, based on our vacancies, we're yes, it offsets the revenues, but because of our savings on the expense side, it's not really that we need those monies in 2020. Had we not received those, we still would have had an operating surplus of around $450,000 to $500,000. So, and also the information that I received from the provincial government is not to expect any provincial support for COVID-related impacts in 2021. Basically, the message is you have time to plan for that. And when I do bring my draft budget forward to council, one of the options available to help mitigate the residual pandemic impacts on our 2021 operations may be a draw on reserve to balance our budget. So I don't know exactly how much that will be. It will definitely not be anywhere close to $950,000. So I do anticipate a significant amount of this surplus being allocated to our capital reserve as per our surplus and deficit policy. But just a little heads up that I probably will be bringing forward as an option to assist in 2021's budget, a draw on reserves that you can say really is from this 950K. That will be an option I'll be bringing forward to council to consider for sure.
Councillor Bush.
Yes, through your worship. Yes, thank you. I don't want to delve too much into the 2021 budget because I know you're still working on it, but you mentioned the fact that phase 2 of the government support grant likely not available to Dryden given our circumstances, and I guess this $950,000 surplus would certainly reinforce that. But having said that, with respect to other government subsidy programs related to wages and benefits, what do we know about CERB and the other program whereby employers only needed to pay a percentage of employees' wages? Is that being factored in, or how does that factor into the 2021 budget, or is it a factor?
Currently, no provincial support for employees who are not if they're not working, they're not employed. So there's nothing factored into the 2021 draft currently related to any provincial support to any employees or any individuals looking for work.
Okay, so we bear 100% of the labor costs in the 2021 budget then with no subsidy?
Well, currently we're budgeting as if we're, staffing at 100% levels.
Yeah, and we pay 100% of the wages?
Yeah, because they would be working.
Yeah, okay. No, I just wanted to get some clarity on that. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I just would also comment that this $950,000, you mentioned a few unfilled positions, but again, we've talked about this before, but it reflects some very good work and very good management by yourself and Mr. Nesbitt and the whole management team. So certainly puts us in a lot better position than we might have been heading into another uncertain year. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment, and I think I don't think that I should shoulder any of that. That was really up on our CAO, Roger Nesbitt, who, as soon as the pandemic hit, guided us and took, immediate action to help alleviate some of those anticipated lost revenues, and so it was really at Roger's leadership that we were able to come in on this position.
No, that's great.
Any other questions, comments before he continues? Nope.
Councillor Shane McKinnon?
I'm sorry, were you going to go into the capital?
I am, yeah.
Yeah, my question is in regards to that. Go ahead.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah, so moving on, good segues on my staff report, Council, I appreciate it. So moving on to the capital spending. So I provided a little table here, but it shows we had just over $315,000 of funding out of operations for our capital plan. And I'm happy to say that we're forecasting to be pretty much right on that spending target. Now there are a lot of projects that were not funded out of operations. They were funded through grants or federal other sources of revenue. But overall, our capital plan, if you're looking at each pocket of funding, is spending to those anticipated levels. There were some projects that didn't happen this year, and those were primarily related to applications not being approved, or an outstanding application that we haven't heard back from. So I don't really have any other comments on our capital plan. I did provide details by project as a separate table, but I do open it up for any questions.
Councillor Shane MacKinnon?
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess, Mr. Treasurer, I just have one question and going to try and get your opinion on something. So, in your experience with capital budgeting for the city of Dryden, in your experience, how much do we rely on provincial and federal grants to do major capital projects in Dryden?
A lot, a significant amount. I mean, when we're committing $315,000 to a capital plan, that doesn't go a long way, right? We contributed more to our capital plan from reserves in 2020 and in 2019 than came out of taxation. But if you look at the projects that we completed, the Van Horn project, our Duke Street project, we would not have been able to do those without higher level of government support.
And so your opinion just on the way things are shaking out in the wake of COVID here, or I guess in the middle of COVID, with supports that have been given to municipalities, agencies and individuals to serve, for example, by the provincial and federal governments, mainly the federal government. Do you think that those grants from the provincial and federal government are going to be retracted substantially or eliminated in the next few years?
I think there's always that risk. My hope is that a program like the federal gas tax maintains. We do have commitments from the federal government for an increasing amount. They've provided information to municipalities across the country, I believe going up to 2025 or 2026, maybe right around there anyway, and I'm hoping that those commitments are maintained. There is questions though, the provincial government committed to OSHA formula funding for 2020, but there's a big unknown of that program for next year. So there is some questions there. I think if anything, they would hold the line on certain programs, and then any new programs, the amount of money available would be smaller or reduced, and the competition therefore would be that much greater. So I think it is going to be a little bit more challenging as all levels of government work through the impacts of this pandemic and the impact on their own budgets as well.
And there'll be an impact on our reserves as a result?
Well, again, it really depends. I think one of the benefits of how we're approaching 2021 is taking those water and sewer revenues and putting those into water and sewer infrastructure. If we can maintain our federal gas tax funding and hopefully our OSHA formula-based funding, I think that there's an opportunity for us to move forward, continue to invest in our infrastructure, and do some big projects still too with some good planning.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? All right.
Oh, I got one more little
Yep.
section here I wanted to go through. I won't go into a lot of details, but I just wanted to provide an update of where, again, great segue by Councillor MacKinnon into my next section on reserves and reserve funds. But so we started the year with $4.5 million. We're anticipating that we're going to be adding approximately $1.27 million. We're going to be drawing based on our capital plan just under $800,000. Our interest earned is a little bit lower than we had hoped, but interest rates have come down. But we're going to end the year at around $5 million. So even though we contributed a significant amount to our capital plan, our reserve and reserve fund balances are growing in 2020.
No comments, questions?
No, good work.
All right.
That's great, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Stephen. All right. Mr. Poole, your staff report, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report tonight is about the Connecting Link application for year 2020-21. Feels like I was just at council a few months ago, or even a month ago, just signing the latest Connecting Link for Duke Street. But a new intake has come forward here, and I'm looking for a recommendation to apply for a grant opportunity under the Connecting Link funding for the replacement of all sets of traffic lights on the Highway 17 and Highway 594 corridor. The Connecting Link program is a $30 million annual program. 77 municipalities can apply for it. There's 352 kilometers of road and 70 bridges that qualify in Ontario. The project funding is typically 9% the Ministry of Transportation and 10% municipal contribution. Just like to point out, the city has been successful in their 5 previous intakes of Connecting Link since 2015. Some for larger amounts, some for lower amounts, but we have been successful every year. Intake 6 was announced on August 13th. The due date is Friday, November 6th for applications. There's been a slight change in the applications, the way they're looked at. Now people can actually ask for funding up to $5 million as opposed to a $3 million max that was previously in place, and that's specifically for bridges. So the number of municipalities awarded funding could be reduced due to that higher amount each municipality can ask for. As I said, this intake is for the replacement and upgrade of 8 sets of traffic lights on Highway 17 and the 594 corridor. In September of 2018, the Ministry of Transportation requested all our highway traffic lights be reviewed, inspected, and a report written on all of that. We did request in the 2019 intake for additional connecting link funding to actually do this study, which we did complete, and we're moving forward from that. We did get 90% funding for that study as well. I'd just like to point out the report came back with several deficiencies to our traffic lights, along with the recommendation. As a note connected to the scope of this study, consideration be given the age of existing traffic signal installations when adopting the strategy for the implementation of improvements recommended in the report. Basically, the original signal installations took place about 40 years ago, proving that the single equipment at some intersections survived about 2 life cycles. So what they're saying is that the equipment should pretty well last 20 years. Some of our intersections are twice that amount. Overall, it should be considered that the existing traffic signal equipment has reached the end of life and should require replacement. We also have to do some upgrading to some of our intersections to meet the new standards. With something would be like the advanced flashing green as opposed with our separate turning arrows that aren't really used in Ontario anymore. Other potential improvements, including removing the ground loop detectors that do cause us problems with a potential camera type system that actually counts traffic and detects when vehicles are at the intersection, and will switch the lights over. We have had problems recently with our traffic light controllers. Recently, one weekend, just before the weekend, we had a controller go down. We had no spare parts to fix it. We actually had to run down to Port Francis to actually get backup. They've replaced all their traffic lights, and they luckily had kept a couple of their controllers, so we were able to grab a controller from them, which was good. We also installed a new controller, which we installed at the Duke Street and Colonization Avenue intersection due to the failure of it, and we took the old one out, and we're now using that as a backup. So even our backups and replacement ones are a good 20 to 40 years old each of them. Basically, they're obsolete. They're hard to get parts for if you need parts or repair them. So this project would consist of replacing all the components that reach the end of life and modernize our systems: controllers, electrical wiring, electrical components, loop detectors, signal heads. In addition, mast arms will be replaced with new and proper arm lengths. That was also pointed out in our study that some of our mast arms don't meet the designed lengths or best practice lengths. Some existing poles are also up for replacement, and we'd be moving a couple of poles to increase visibility and traffic protection. The project would make all city crosswalks, pedestrian crosswalks, AODA compliant. And the estimated project cost for this is $1.3 million. That's for the 8 intersections. The city would contribute $130,000, while the connecting link would cover $1.17 million towards the project. And that's my report for this evening. Just, if anyone had any questions, or if I should proceed with that.
Councillor Bush?
Yes, thank you. Through your worship, Mr. Poulos, I read your report, and it looks like a heck of a deal if we can get it. Spend $130,000 of our money for a $1.3 million project to do all that modernization. And I have noticed the number of incidents that we've had with our traffic lights over the past 2 or 3 years, and certainly seems warranted from my perspective if we're successful getting this. Thank you.
Councillor McKay?
Through the chair. Yeah, Blake, what are, if you handicapped our odds, 30 million is not a lot of money for 77 municipalities, is it, that are eligible?
Yeah, 77 municipalities that are eligible for funding.
Yeah, so if you had to handicap our chances of being successful, would you be staying at the Hilton in Vegas, or what?
Well, let's say our last 5 applications, we've been 100% successful, but I don't want to say that about each one as they come up. I'm hoping we were successful with it. I'd like to keep this fresh in MTO's mind as well. They asked us to do this study. I've reviewed the study with their traffic section as well here, and it is their traffic light well, and to bring them up to the standards they should be, I'm hoping they see it as an opportunity to upgrade as well onto the connecting link and the highway system.
Yeah. No, that's why I was asking it, because we've been successful in the past here. So, okay.
Councillor Shane MacKinnon?
Thank you. AODA compliant, is that in regards to tone for visually impaired and things like that?
Yeah, visually impaired and hearing impaired at the crosswalks as well, which would, for the visually impaired, would also the buttons for the crosswalk and hearing at them as well would be increased, as well as probably at crosswalk pads. It'd probably be, I can't remember the name of them now, but there's pads at them that tell people where to stop and what direction they're heading in as well here if they're visually impaired.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Councillor Price?
Just a simple question, Blake. What does it cost per light to change over per light?
Per set of lights? Like a whole intersection?
Yeah.
Probably, what did I figure? It's 160,000. Even just for that controller alone, those are very expensive. They're about 60,000. Never mind the lights and the wiring and everything else that goes with it. Usually the installation has to include somebody specific coming in from the company to install them and get them working properly. So, no, not as cheap as I thought it would be either, but even that study alone cost us $100,000 just for the 8 intersections. So.
Would you consider putting in additional lights at the same time, or we're at where we're at with lights?
We're at where we are at. That would be something that would have to go through with traffic work. Also has to be approved through MTO. You probably have to set up and design them after they would agree to it, which would cost us additional money. And that's what I'm looking at with these PHMs we don't have to go ahead and redesign the traffic lights. They've accepted the way they are. They've told us some new positions where some of the poles could go. So we basically have it designed and ready to go. As far as other traffic light sets, that would be something that would be brought to the traffic committee. But all our lights are on connecting link, and MTO does have to approve, and we have to give them traffic counts and why we require it and other things. I know they weren't excited about at least another set of lights on Highway 17 in the past. So.
Yeah, I was thinking more in town down by the Safeway intersection.
Actually, we've looked at that as even a pedestrian crossover there. Mm-hmm. Actually, those sets of lights are considered too close together to have 3 sets of lights within 3 blocks like that. Even to have a pedestrian crossover, like with the buttons you press and go across, based on the traffic and the bylaws, what you have to follow, those intersections are considered close enough for people to walk to cross at, as opposed to cross at an unsafe location like White Avenue. It's unfortunate, but that's the way the legislation reads.
Okay. Thank you.
Just raising that application ceiling to $5 million concerns me, Blake, just thinking that it does reduce the odds of the smaller communities getting them, because I have this sneaking suspicion that the larger municipalities have been pushing to get that raised. So we'll see what the odds are. I don't know if I would want to make any bets on that, but so far so good. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have first and second motion.
The first and second was Councillor Bush, Councillor Carlucci. Moved by Councillor Bush, seconded by Councillor Carlucci. The Council of the Corporation of the City of Dryden directs staff to apply for a grant opportunity from the Ministry of Transportation Connecting Link Program for the replacement of 8 sets of traffic lights on the Highway 17 and Highway 594 corridors, and further that the City of Dryden commit to using capital funds for the municipal contribution component of this project, and further that if the application is successful, the City of Dryden will proceed with the project in accordance with the timeline specified in the application, and further that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to sign all documentation related to these matters, and further that the necessary bylaws be presented to City Council for ratification.
All in favor? All right, carried. Thank you. We have no notices of motion this evening, but we do have 3 motions, and I'll ask the acting clerk to walk us through this portion of the agenda.
Okay, our first motion this evening is to appoint members to the City of Dryden Working Circle. So we'll be looking for someone to move and second that motion, please.
Is there a reading of the motion?
I could read it first, and then we could find a mover and seconder if that would work. The following be appointed to the City of Dryden Working Circle for the remainder of the term of council: Councillor Ron Bush, Councillor Shane MacKinnon, Councillor Michelle Price, CAO Roger Nesbitt, HR Manager Jennifer Peakhouse, Lloyd Napish, Cheryl Edwards, Neil McLeod, Lisa Couchette, and Ted Mitchell. Councillor McKay would like to move it, and Councillor Martin McKinnon. Thank you. Okay, so...
Excuse me, through your worship. I'd just like to say, just a comment on the Working Circle group, and perhaps my other colleagues in council may want to also have something to say, but from my perspective, I'm very, very pleased and I feel privileged to be working with such a high-quality group of people in the Working Circle. I think that both the Indigenous and non-Indigenous members of that Working Circle, the several meetings that we've had so far have really demonstrated a great ability to talk about the issues and listen to each other and work constructively. And so I'm feeling very good about the group that the city has just sanctioned, and I just wanted to say that publicly.
Thank you.
Motion again. Moved by Councillor McKay, seconded by Councillor Martin McKinnon, that the following be appointed to the City of Dryden Working Circle for the remainder of the term of council: Councillor Ron Bush, Councillor Shane McKinnon, Councillor Michelle Price, CAO Roger Nesbitt, HR Manager Jennifer Peakhouse, Lloyd Napish, Cheryl Edwards, Neil McLeod, Lisa Couchette, and Ted Mitchell.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
The second motion is one presented by Mayor Wilson requesting an updated O.P.P costing proposal. And if you'd like, I could read that motion too before we find movers and seconders. Motion reads that the council direct the City of Dryden CAO to send a letter to Ontario Solicitor General, the Honourable Sylvia Jones, to request pricing for O.P.P services for the City of Dryden, and further that copies of the letter be sent to the Dryden Police Services Board, Dryden Police Chief Doug Paulson, and the Dryden Police Associations.
Comments, questions? Councillor Shane MacKinnon. Mic is off.
Muted, Councillor McKinnon.
The rousing start. Maybe muted is better for my presentation. As stated previously, I was actually astounded that this issue could be brought back to a city council table during our term, either procedurally and as a point of revisiting a divisive and contentious issue a mere 17 months after it had been resolved. And this council has so much good work to do. We have issues and items which will enhance our community and move us forward, but now we will be asked to go backwards to look at more dubious estimated numbers and vote on an issue that rightly should be decided by the next voters in this community. I am sure that we will hear arguments that this council was elected to make those decisions. Well, really, you have made this decision. You likely agonized over this decision as I have. You likely went out and took the pulse of the community, heard from those who are for and against this issue, but you summoned the courage to vote with your head and your heart, but apparently that might have been all for naught. Why are O.P.P costs challenged in almost every jurisdiction where they supply policing? Why are O.P.P reducing officer responses by turning to online reporting? Why are the O.P.P constantly understaffed and looking for recruits? Why are some contract policing communities dealing with reduced response times based on staff shortages? And I think we should talk about the history of our last costing. We have spent, in this term of council, I think it must have been over $100,000 to determine that we did not want to change our police service to the O.P.P. We formed a committee of knowledgeable, competent people. We undertook surveys and interviews, analysis of costs, response times, caseloads, calls for service, governance models, close to 2 years of work culminating in a recommendation that we do not proceed with this contract. This issue was voted down, as you recall, 6-1. And I think that the costing was voted down for 3 main reasons. Number one, the savings, if any, were minor in nature and wouldn't manifest themselves until after 2024 or later. The cost for calls for service alone remain unknown even to the municipalities that are policed by the O.P.P today. Number two, the costs of transition were $4 million, which was not an amount which was acceptable, and the payback was far too long. This has changed very little. Number three, the third and most important reason was that the public surveyed did not want to change the service, and that was by a wide margin. The reasons varied from familiarity with the Dryden police members to response times, making police reports to an officer in person, the extensive community service programs offered by the DPS, and to the fact that a local service is governed by a local board and not just dictated to by provincial overseers. And I estimated over 85% of those surveys wanted to retain their police service. So some rumors persist about our service and whether it's struggling, but there's no indication from the Police Services Board or the Chief of Police that this is the case. All first responders in the community have been adversely affected by COVID-19 and have struggled to field enough people in these challenging days. As I understand, there has been attrition in the service, but one can only speculate whether that is spurred by the constant specter of disbandment, the aggressive recruitment efforts of other services, or the current disaffection in some corners of the police community in general. Some will say that this is a purely financial decision and that the numbers should be the deciding factor. Again, 17 months ago, the cost per property, not per household, per property, as indicated in the final report, was $1,113 for the DPS in the first year and $1,189 for the O.P.P in the first year. We need to consider that the O.P.P recent billing model will only start to affect some municipalities this year. In November, the O.P.P will reconcile with municipalities 2 years of calls for service bills and overtime, amongst other things. And the last time this was undertaken, a neighboring municipality received an unexpected bill for $400,000 on top of its calls for service bill. So are we financially able to make this move? The ability of provincial and federal grants, the availability of provincial and federal grants has declined in recent years, and now, under the shadow of COVID-19 assistance programs, the availability of municipal infrastructure money will almost be non-existent, according to AMO. If we drain existing services to abolish our police service, how will we undertake projects that need our immediate attention? And those will be repairing and repaving roads, paving roads that aren't paved, sewer and water infrastructure, arena repairs, pool repairs, aging fleet replacement, equipment replacement, et cetera, et cetera. This doesn't even include promised improvements to the arena, pool, parks, buildings, and other services. And this does not include the needs, the human needs of our staff. Realistic and thoughtful increases in wages and benefits for city employees, union and non-union. If this council spends our community savings, our community reserves on doing something that the majority of Drydenites don't want, the public trust is lost. That is why I have proposed this issue to go to a question on the 2022 municipal election ballot. If in the new term of council, they are given a clear mandate through a question to conduct another O.P.P. costing, then that should be respected and acted upon. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors, comments, questions? Councillor Bush?
Yes, thank you, through your worship. This police costing motion that's before us tonight, for me, this motion is about the future. And it's about the immediate future, and most importantly, it's about the sustainability of Dryden as a community going forward. Councillor MacKinnon, you noted all of the cost pressures that are likely to be coming at the city, and I agree with you on those. It's likely that we're not going to be able to get the support that we've had from the past two senior levels of government. It's likely that other pressures, such as continued downloading through the Northwest Health Unit and other agencies, is going to continue. It's likely that our OMPF grants are going to continue to be decreased at about 5% a year. So all of those cost pressures that you note, in my mind, are going to continue. And so it's for exactly that reason, that we need the savings. If there are savings to be made and to be had, it's exactly those reasons that we need to have those savings. Almost 2 years ago, the first O.P.P. costing proposal was presented to council as we discussed. And as we all know, council did vote 6-1 to turn down the proposal. And at that time, each councillor expressed their own reasons for their decision at that particular point in time. In my case, I voted against accepting the proposal, and I stated that even though, from an investment perspective, the return on the investment was excellent, I felt that in 2018, the city's debt and annual debt repayment obligations were too high to handle an added burden at that particular time. I also stated that it may be appropriate to revisit this issue in 2021 when the city's Dryden mobility debts essentially were paid off. And that's where we are now. There is a provision in our bylaws to allow council to revisit decisions, past decisions, to take into account changing circumstances. A decision that's made at one point in time may be correct for that point in time, but it may not be the correct decision down the road. And besides and beyond the city now having the ability to handle similar transition costs, what else has changed since 2018? I would suggest a lot. First of all, COVID-19. And although it appears that the city will finish 2020 with a substantial surplus, there is great financial uncertainty and concern heading into 2021. Budget preparations are underway as we speak. We heard about some of them tonight, and significant questions remain unanswered, including reduced city revenues from facility usage and user fees. We've already talked about concerns around annual provincial and federal grants. Will they continue at past levels or be reduced? Somebody has to pay for these incredible debts that are being incurred at both levels of senior government to deal with COVID-19. And I'm not suggesting that they don't need to be incurred, but I am suggesting that at some point they do need to be paid back. And unfortunately, cities and municipalities may bear a lot of the brunt of those payback decisions. Secondly, since 2018, serious crime has increased in Dryden by approximately 44%. And that was an issue before COVID-19 hit. And now with COVID-19, it's not unreasonable to expect that these increased crime levels, most of it attributed to hard drug use, will lead to higher costs within our own police service. If you look at the cost models that were presented in the last costing study, it showed that as calls increased, costs went up not only for O.P.P, but also for our own police service. And given the analysis that was done, further increased costs in our own police service will likely increase the spread between Dryden Police Service and O.P.P costs per household. But that's something that a proper costing analysis would present with more clarity than a conversation would tonight. But even without these recent major changes, the reasons for revisiting an O.P.P costing study are pretty simple, and I think very well explained in Mayor Wilson's notice of motion background document. And I would encourage all of our citizens to read it carefully. And in summary, it states that Dryden's cost of policing per household is substantially higher than all other smaller communities in Northwestern Ontario. Liabilities associated with our community's police service are borne by the community 100%. If the city was serviced by the O.P.P, those would be borne by the O.P.P and spread across the province. And as the mayor notes, it's not a comment, this motion is not a comment on the quality of the police officers serving our community. It's a comment on the ability of small police forces to deliver services on a cost-effective basis, and that is out of their control. That's why I would presume, having talked to people in Fort Frances and Kenora, that that's why they went to the O.P.P. And it is true that O.P.P costs do go up, and it is true that communities push back on that. But it's also true that our own Dryden Police Service costs go up on an annual basis, and that increase in the past 15 years has been about 4% a year. So it all goes up. But if you go and you look into the O.P.P website, you will see that the cost increases and costs per community are pretty stable, generally pretty stable. Again, that's more of an in-depth study that a costing study would get into in more depth. The last thing I want to really mention, and again, this is, I think, been brought home in the last 2 years more than it has been previously, is this notion of communities having more control of policing costs and policing decisions when they have their own police force. That notion may have been true many years ago, but I don't believe that that's any longer the case. If you look at what happens in negotiations, for example, the negotiating process is such that a lot of people's time, energy, and effort is taken up on both sides when you deal with those issues locally. And if the local bargaining agency for the police service doesn't agree with the offer, they take it to arbitration. And as soon as it goes in front of a third-party arbitrator, and that's all part of the process, it's well established, it happens in all negotiating circumstances, then those negotiations essentially are taken away from the local negotiating committees and are left to a third party. And so there's really little to no control over that process, other than just saying yes to the demands. And I can also tell you that as a councillor, the city has very little influence over policing decisions. That's really left to the police service and the board. Now, the city's 100% funder of the police service, but we really have very little influence as a council, except through a couple of members on the police services board, about really what goes on in the police service. So I would suggest that any real control is more of a notion based on perhaps what happened decades ago and not really borne out by what happens today. And so when I look at the financial benefits, potential financial benefits, and I say potential because you can only get to the real benefits through a proper costing study, are not minor in my mind. They're in excess of $1 million a year. And if you go into today and look at the financial information reports for all of the smaller communities in our area and elsewhere in Ontario, you'll find a huge gap between the cost per property or the cost per household in Dryden versus other communities. So that's a penalty that most communities don't have the luxury of affording to pay, given the same issues that we contend with. Very high backlog of infrastructure projects and failing infrastructure, numerous demands for more funding, be it for different boards such as the Northwest Health Unit, the equivalent of DSABs, increased wages and benefits for our local staff and for our local unionized employees. All of those things don't go away. So it's hard for me to imagine that Dryden can sit here and take $1 million plus year penalty to pay for policing versus all of our other peers and think that we're somehow different than they are. And I personally don't hear a lot of complaints about O.P.P. in other communities. I did talk to the mayor, then mayor of Kenora, David Canfield, about O.P.P. costs and their decision to go O.P.P. And he initiated the discussion with me at a conference. And I challenged him on an article that showed up in CKDR, whereby he was complaining about O.P.P. costs going up. And he said, yes, I did complain. He says, I'm the mayor. What do you expect me to do? O.P.P. costs are going up, and it's my job to push back and to get them to stay at as low a level as possible. He said, but in terms of the difference in cost between O.P.P. and the Kenora detachment, it was still huge, and it was absolutely the right decision. And he said the benefits went beyond simply the costs. And so given the professionality of both the Dryden Police Service and the O.P.P., given the fact that all of these officers essentially live and work in our community, and the professionalism and the care that they all have, I would not expect the level of service, and that came out in the last review, I would not expect the level of service to go down. I would expect it to stay the same, or in fact improve. And the reason I say improve is that if the costing study, if this gets approved, and the costing study comes in similarly manned to the last one, in fact, there will be an additional officer per shift than we are currently able to do with our Dryden Police Service. So for all of these reasons, I see that this motion is really about the future, and it's appropriate to revisit it because of the recent changes due to COVID-19, the changes that are likely to occur in funding formulas going forward, the continued pressures on the city financially that were not there in 2019, and our continuing obligations to our citizens and our employees. So for those reasons, I would support this motion and think that it's appropriate for this council to tackle it rather than pushing it on to somebody else and forego those potential savings if in fact they are available to the city of Dryden. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Anyone else, comments? Questions? Councillor Carlucci?
Through Mayor Wilson. Just for public disclosure, I am the chair of the Dryden Police Services Board, so I want people to be aware of that. And as you had mentioned, Councillor Shane MacKinnon, that you've heard no comments from the board, and really the board is designed through the Police Act that anything in a closed session of the Police Services Board cannot be disclosed to the public. Not saying there is anything, I'm just saying that open minutes do come to council when we do have them, so just to throw that out there right away. Secondly, this is a costing, and you had mentioned that it's council's job to do that, and I truly believe that it is our job to look at any potential ways of saving some. If there's a savings, it's there. If it's not, we'll know once we get the information. And I think decisions that I make are based on facts, not on assumptions of what might come down the road. 17 months ago, we didn't know anything about COVID. We didn't know about increases, say, i.e., hate saying it again, but Northwest Health Unit, i.e., or downloading of DSABs. These are costs that we as a city need to bore, and if we don't find ways to offset those, that just means that our taxpayers are going to be getting increases that, I'm not wanting to do at this point, but it's something down the road that's going to happen sooner than later, I think. Costs increase everywhere. Like I said, the Northwest Health Unit gave us a memo saying that our costs are going to be this in 2 to 3 years. That's just how life is right now. Increases are going to happen, and we have to find ways to stop those, offset those increases. Again, I think our job is to fight, to find ways to find any kinds of savings. I don't know what's going to come out of this costing. Last time was last time, and things were different as they are today. So I honestly think getting the costing is the right move, and that's all I'm saying. Until that costing comes in, I really can't talk about any other assumptions. I don't know if they're coming in better, they're coming in worse. I have no idea if that's going to happen, but until that number's in front of me, then I can start making some more informed decisions. So I will support your motion.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other comments, questions? Nope. Well, looks like we need...
Okay, so we'd be looking for someone to move and second the motion, please. Councillor Bush. Is there someone willing to second the motion? Councillor Martin MacKinnon, thank you. Okay, let me just find it again. Moved by Councillor Bush, seconded by Councillor Martin MacKinnon, that Council direct the City of Dryden CAO to send a letter to Ontario's Solicitor General, the Honourable Sylvia Jones, to request pricing for O.P.P services for the City of Dryden, and further that copies of the letter be sent to the Dryden Police Services Board, Dryden Police Chief Doug Paulson, and the Dryden Police Associations.
I'm just thinking of... Yeah, we'll have the vote. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor McKinnon. All right, motion carried. Thank you. I should maybe, I think this is the time to bring it up. Maybe Roger, I'm looking at you, because I'm just thinking of the last time. So there's a couple of critical steps that council has to act on fairly quickly to get this process for the next number of months of work started. Basically thinking committees and consultants. So I'm recommending that we utilize consultants again. And to do that, we need to first form a costing committee. And this committee has to ensure public access to the process, transparency, and thirdly, financial accuracy. So council, administration will be looking to you for you to give direction on composition of the committee as soon as possible. And once formed, our CAO should provide a staff report confirming a recommended consultant. So I'm just wondering how council wishes to proceed with committee formation and for input. I'll give you my suggestion first, and then maybe that'll stir. My personal suggestion is to use the Finance Committee, and that's mainly because this will boil down as it did, not that you discount other issues or other factors, but it really did come down last time to a financial decision with most councillors. And full disclosure, I serve on the Finance Committee, and since I brought forward this motion, I would not want to participate in the Costing Committee process. So, Councillor Carlucci?
Through the mayor, I mean, for my suggestions, as I sit on the board, I would not want to be sitting as part of the committee, but I would recommend that we have Councillors Bush, Martin MacKinnon, and Michelle Price, CAO and Treasurer, as part of the committee.
Okay. All right, anyone else? Comments? So you said Councillor Bush?
Councillor Bush, if they want to stand.
Sure.
Councillor Martin MacKinnon and Councillor Michelle Price.
Okay. So Councillor Bush and Councillor Price and Councillor MacKinnon, how do you feel about that?
Your worship?
Yes.
I guess I'm good with that. My vote to support the resolution is strictly tied to the fact that I believe the times we now live in, police costings are going to become a way of life every couple of years, every 3 years. Things have drastically changed since we last dealt with this issue, and I mean, I see the use of a consultant, maybe the same consultant, I don't know, to upgrade what we had in place there and see where we stand. We as a community have to be very cautious now, and you've all talked about it tonight about the loss of funding and where is money going to come from. It's not just looking at an O.P.P. cost. We're going to have to continually look at all our costing to survive. You can't go to the public for a 4% tax increase or a 5% tax increase every year. Coming out of this virus thing, we've got businesses that are just hanging on by their fingernails, if they're hanging on at all. They can't afford a bunch of tax increases. So, you know, my look on this is that you're faced with doing this every couple of years, whether you like it or not. So, sure, I'll sit on that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Price? You have to unmute yourself, Councillor Price.
My apologies. I've got 3 dogs here, so I'll like to sit on that board. I'm actually quite surprised that I would be asked to. I was part of the first. It was probably one of my first biggest decisions that I made, as Councillor MacKinnon had said back to not even 2 years ago about the O.P.P. costing and staying with DPS, and you know, both Councillor MacKinnon and Councillor Bush have put forward really good points on why we should or should not stay. And I'd like to be a part of that group of people that can help determine which way that we should be going. And like Councillor Carlucci said, I believe, is that this motion right now is simply to request that costing and once again compare the services between DPS and O.P.P. And along with that, not only comparing the cost, but the cost of doing that, they're comparing the services as well. And that's all it is for now. I have a lot of pride for our DPS, and I'll tell you that straight up. I have never met such a great group of people in my life. Like, we recently had to deal with a couple of things, and I don't think it even comes down to you know, comparing. They do an amazing job, and I know their jobs are extremely hard to do. So I will be bringing that perspective into this as well, and I will go in with an open mind, and I've certainly been doing a lot of reading already once this motion was brought forward in about a month ago now, I guess. And it is it's going to be a very hard decision, one way or another, which way we should go. But I do believe that our DPS are great folks, and it has nothing to do with the type of service that they deliver to us, that's for sure. So on saying that, you know, I would like to be part of the financial part of the grouping.
Okay, thank you. Much appreciated. Councillor Bush?
Yes, I'd be prepared to sit on that as well, and I can assure council that I'm going to take a very objective look at whatever it is that the O.P.P. present in terms of costing, and also from a service delivery perspective, get into a little bit more detail than we were able to do last time. I think there's some opportunities to really delve into what the particular offering might be in terms of the levels of service. And so I think a good, hard, objective look is required. And again, as we had a letter recently from one of the ministers talking about the highly disruptive times that we have been in since February and March with COVID-19. I mean, basically our world has been turned upside down. And so for those reasons, as I stated earlier, I think it's appropriate to look at it, and I'd be prepared to be a part of the team that does that and does the analysis and brings forward whatever it is that we need to bring forward to council for a later discussion and approval.
Okay, thank you. So we'll have, well, Councillor...
Sorry, just another comment I neglected to make. That decision that I made does not reflect on how I feel about the DPS. They are great people. This is a great organization. This, again, comes down to getting some numbers and facts to work with. So just want to clarify that point.
Okay, thank you. So we'll have a costing committee of Councillor Bush, Councillor Price, Councillor Martin MacKinnon, and our treasurer and our CAO. And they can set to work, and we will get a report from our CAO regarding consultants. All right?
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you very much. All right, back to you.
Okay, and the third motion this evening was one presented by Councillor Shane MacKinnon, also regarding the O.P.P. costing request. And I guess I will read the motion as it was presented, and we will move forward from there. Motion reads that a question be placed on the ballot at the 2022 municipal election, reading, should Dryden City Council request a cost for policing the community from the Ontario Provincial Police during the 2022 to 2026 term of council?
Comments, questions, anyone? Councillor Price, is that your hand?
You're off, you're muted.
Sorry, I keep turning off my my mic here. Once again, I want to say that I deeply respect what Councillor MacKinnon is saying in his motion and in his presentation tonight. And I know that, like Councillor MacKinnon, we have, like I'll reiterate again, that we do have a great police department, and I just feel like I need to speak to say that once again, I was part of that last vote, and things do change, and we can all say that at some point that this is not the same world that we're in from 2 years ago, and I personally know how important that decision was, and maybe at that point as well, honestly, to say is that being a little bit not knowing the process of what I do know now, and I don't think that this vote should be passed on to a new councillor, because I know what it feels like. I was in that seat. It was one of my very first decisions that I had to make, and I truly do believe that let's do the costing, let's determine which way we should be going, and make the decision, and let the new councillors that come onto council in the next, within the next 2 years, come out with a clean slate so that they can move ahead and make the decisions that are going to be needed to be made within the next, within the next 4 years after us. So I do understand where Councillor MacKinnon is coming from, but I don't think that this is something that should be passed on to another set of council, possibly a brand new set of councillors coming in and not fully understanding what the study is going to put out, like I did in the last motion that came out for the O.P.P costing. So for myself, I don't believe that this would be right nor fair to pass on to the next set of councillors. We were asked to make these decisions as hard as what they are, and so that is why I'm not going to agree to the motion for Councillor Shane MacKinnon tonight. But I just wanted to put that out there, that I just don't think it's fair or right to pass it on to the next set of councillors that are going to be coming in.
Right, anyone else? Okay. Looking for
Yes, we'll look for a mover and a seconder. Seeing none, we will say that motion has failed.
Okay, so we're on to item 15, reports of municipal officers, CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a few comments tonight. I was going to comment about the budget, but that's being done to death tonight. But just to say that staff are well into it, planning for 2021. As mentioned by both the Treasurer and Councillor Bush, we are forecasting significant impacts to our revenues from our COVID situation. So we're in the process of trying to mitigate that, but it will prove difficult. So more to come on that. Our service delivery review consultants have prepared a draft final report. I'm just in the process of reviewing that, and we'll have our management team reviewing that as well, with plans for our consultant to present that at the November council meeting. So council can look forward to that, as well as the rest of the community. I want to say a big thank you to all the Dryden Fall Fest organizers and volunteers. They're just in the thick of putting on all the events that they planned this fall. Very well attended to date, and they still have a few more events, I think, to go. So again, a big thank you to all those folks. And just a general comment to all our residents to have a safe Halloween. Look out for all the trick-or-treaters that are probably going to be out on the streets. And to everybody, practice good COVID habits while you're trick-or-treating. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Treasurer?
The only thing that I wanted to note is I know that Alison at the beginning of the meeting in the public notice spoke about the email that we have set up for the public to provide feedback and input on our budgetary process and to communicate what's important to them. So I just want to reinforce that message. With COVID, we're not able to have or to try to set up and establish face-to-face public engagement. I am putting some thought in the future of what we might be able to do and even start the process a little bit earlier. I'm thinking maybe when we get our trade show up and running, maybe the City of Dryden can have a booth set up that staff and maybe members of the council can participate in and answer questions, and we can provide information during that as well. Just wanted to put that out there, but we're really limited this year, so please, members of the public, email the city with any input or feedback that's important. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Stephen. Clerk?
Excuse me, Your Worship. Question?
Go ahead, sure.
Yes, through your worship. Stephen, just a quick question. Have you had much feedback yet through the email system from the public?
None today.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, just a reminder to the public that the winter overnight parking restrictions are now in effect within the city of Dryden. Also, the cemetery licensing coordinator and I took part with many others in the city's emergency tabletop exercises that took place last week. Recently, a lot of my time has been dedicated to the council and administration operating budgets for 2021. If anybody's recently been around the administration office, they may have noticed our former clerk, Colleen Brasso, currently working in there for a short period of time. She is leading the meeting management software project that's underway. As well, the first planning meeting for the 2022 Northwest Response Forum took place October the 15th, and I'm presently sitting on that committee as a member of the city's group.
Glad that Colleen is finding it difficult to retire.
She is.
That's good for us. Great, thank you. Public Works, Blake.
Yeah, last week we had our last day for our seasonal staff, our summer staff as well. We were able to use actually employee for the arena for the whole summer as well because of COVID, so that did work out well, and thanks to Steve for loaning into us. Fleet's been getting busy for the winter season coming up here, and they are ready currently here as we see snow falling now and then, especially this past weekend, and they're busy putting summer equipment away for hibernation like the sweepers and mowers. In roads, we're finishing off some final concrete work that we need to get to, specifically some curbing. We're actually still doing some ditching and culvert replacements in the rural area. We'll continue that till the weather actually changes where we can no longer do it anymore. And we're actually already started a small project, a drainage project on Earl Avenue, replacing some storm sewer that has caused us a problem in the past. And we have also determined from CCTV that some of the pipe is in bad condition. So it actually lets us know how far we have to go down the street to repair that area. And with waste management, environmental testing just got underway today for the fall sampling. That usually takes a couple of days. There is a member from AECOM in the city assisting us with that work, and they also do reports up that we have to submit to the ministry. Fencing is also going up at the Barclay landfill as part of the closure that we have to do out there. And our Bolt Mag is actually returning back from some warranty work. I think we made a good purchase with our warranty, as we've had it off for warranty work actually twice this year already, and we are getting our money's worth on the work. Unfortunately, we get a little bit behind at the landfill site as well. Recycling, provincial government just came out with the Resource Recovery and Circular Economy Act, the Blue Box edition. They have 45 days to comment. This is to make producers responsible for operating the Blue Box program. We were told last week that the transition date for Dryden is 2023 from that. The surrounding area is all over that place between 2023 and 2025, but Kenora is 2023, who is basically our biggest partner in the recycling, sharing trucks and trailers and things like that, and they're also transitioning in 2023 if everything goes forward. Water and sewer, we're busy with our plants upgrading our SCADA system. Manhole lining was completed about 2 weeks ago, and our capital work with Van Horn and Duke Street are both now completed. We're just reviewing final invoices. There's quite a few reports to do back to the funding agencies as well as claims. And with the overpass, we only have a little bit more work to do, which is backfill behind some of the new sidewalks there, and you'll probably see people up there as the weather is going to get warm here for at least a few days within the next few weeks here. So that's my report for this evening.
All right, thank you. Manager of Community Services, Steve.
Evening all. All minor sport users have now resumed programming here at Dryden Memorial Arena, that being our Dryden girls hockey, Dryden figure skating, and Dryden minor hockey. Our old timers hockey group has commenced as well, and women's hockey has a start date communicated to us. Drop-in pay and play has also commenced, as has arena walking. Ice 2 is presently being prepared or installed as I speak, and we have that completion date set for November the 1st, at which point we'll be able to increase our offering of hours to all of our user groups, and obviously we'll be able to commence our curling for both the old timers and the mixed league curling once Ice 2 is in place at Red. Pool and gym numbers continue to trend upwards, and in some instances they've surpassed our expectations. With that in mind, I would like to remind our residents and our patrons that it's becoming increasingly important to call and reserve your spot in either a swim or for a gym session. We're going to reach those periods we already have for the pool, and we're going to reach those periods for the gym where we may find ourselves at capacity and no longer be able to accept any more at a given time. So great news, but it requires a little bit more coordination. Last week, pleased to announce that Community Services Department submitted an application to the New Horizons Seniors Fund to increase seniors' physical fitness programming here at the sports complex and around the community in general. Not only will we be looking at physical fitness programming, but also some information and awareness sessions for our seniors to protect them. We know they are vulnerable, and that could be from their health or it could also be from the scams and some of the other unfortunate individuals who are trying to take advantage of our seniors. So looking forward to that program, or a successful announcement. Unfortunately, we have had a service interruption with regards to MyLift. I hope we've communicated that well enough at this point. We are awaiting a part, and we expect to be up at one point, within the next 2 weeks was the original estimate, and that unit went down late last week. Concrete slab at Rotary Park, or the Rotary Soccer Complex has been poured, which pretty well completes that facility in itself and ensures that we have an accessible viewing platform from the top over the building or in front of the building looking down onto the fields. Special thanks to the Miller Group for their donation of the concrete on that project. Community Services continues to update and prepare for our launch of our new booking software. We'll be able to move a lot of our programming online, accept bookings online, accept programming online, and share what is happening directly to our website. So that'll be a good boost for us, or I hope it is. It was identified in the operational review as an opportunity for us to increase some of our programming and our opportunities for raising funds and reducing some of our manpower costs that are there, or more specifically our tasks that we're handling right now. I'd like to express my thanks to the Dream Committee and Council and Administration for supporting the arena flooring project, as well as some of the other renovations that have taken place at the sports complex. Recently, the reviews have been all positive, really made a big difference there for our residents, for our users, anyone coming in. It's kind of a little bit of restoring the pride, and it's really a team effort. Couldn't have been done by ourselves. So thanks to Dream and thanks again to Council for supporting that project and bringing it to reality. In closing, I'd like to extend special thanks again to the volunteer board members of all of our minor sport groups or adult sports group who've been tasked with reintroducing their organizations back to the facility. It certainly hasn't been easy. I know it's been a challenge and sometimes met with a little bit of resistance. They've done it for all of the right reasons, and really proud of their efforts, and it couldn't have been done without their hard work. So thank you to all of those, and special thanks as well to our patrons and our participants and their parents. Their cooperation has truly enabled a safe start to or resumption to our activities here at the Dryden Recreation Club. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Appreciate it. And last but not least of the senior managers, Fire Chief Grimwood.
Thank you. Last week we ran two emergency exercises, two tabletop exercises where we simulated a severe winter weather event with a sustained power outage. And we brought together all of our primary and alternate members of our control group. They did a fantastic job. It was really refreshing to see all the good discussion and problem solving that occurred to try and get the city through the simulated emergencies. So really makes you confident about the work and the training that's been done towards emergency management. Fire Prevention Week has wrapped up, and this year was all virtual. We relied on several of our volunteer firefighters. They produced different public education videos, and we pushed the videos out by website and social media and got a lot of traction, a lot of attention. So the firefighters did a phenomenal job. They would have liked to have been in the schools and hosting station tours and one-on-one events, but we play with the cards we're dealt, and this year we certainly had to think outside of the box in terms of the way we engage the public. So really proud of the way our team handled that. And this weekend coming up, we have approximately 15 firefighters will be writing their firefighter level 2 certification exam. So the same group that wrote their level 1 exams in June are now preparing to write the level 2 exams, which is essentially an advanced firefighter. So busy times, and no significant incidents over the past few weeks, which is always good news.
All right, thank you very much. And now for the councillors. Councillor Price. Muted.
Once again, I'm sorry. Busy couple of weeks. Fall Festival, been helping out with the last two events that we had. First one was for the little kids during the day, and then the second one helped setting up for the scare night for the adults. And I was not participating in walking through that event, so I was glad to help set it up though. PACE meetings, and of course the Chamber of Commerce, the BEA went on, and congratulations to all of the winners. Other than that, that's pretty much it. Just up in Thunder Bay right now, taking care of the sick husband.
Right, recuperating husband, is that right?
He's he can't feel it from his waist down right now, so we'll see what he's like tomorrow.
Oh, great. All right. Well, thank you very much. And Councillor Shane MacKinnon.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I want to report on the fact that the working circle has met since our last meeting, and I believe that that organization has hit the ground running. And we've added, as you know from our motion this evening, a new member being Ted Mitchell, who is a representative of the Métis Nation. We have agreed on terms of reference, and I think this might have been reported previously, for the group and some procedural issues, and our thanks to Councillor Bush, who worked on those quite a good deal. We've also developed some communication strategies to be used in media relations, and the group was tasked with coming up with a couple of issues that we could bring forward to council in short order, preferably before year's end. And so you can look forward to hearing about the renaming of a city asset and a recommendation, hopefully regarding council procedures in the near future. And just to echo the sentiments of Councillor Bush, that we really have an excellent group on hand, and my expectations is there will be some really interesting and thoughtful recommendations coming towards to council from that group, and I'm very happy to report that Cheryl Edwards, who's the Executive Director of Dryden Native Friendship Center, and myself will be co-chairing the working circle meetings, and I think that's much to the relief of our CEO, Roger Nesbitt, who had that task up till now, and I just want to thank him on behalf of the group.
All right, thank you very much. And Councillor Marty MacKinnon.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have much to report other than to hear everyone's thank you to the Fall Fest volunteers for the wonderful things they're doing out at the Marsh area. That's so good for our community right now. Just to give council a heads up, in November, KDSB CAO Henry Wall will be coming and speaking to us, probably in the closed session if we can arrange that. And so he's going to talk about anything you want to talk about, including homelessness and long-term care and those type of things. So prepare your questions. He'll give you all the answers that you're looking for, I hope.
All right, thank you very much. Councillor McKay.
Yes, I'd just like to say I very much share Councillor Bush's and Councillor McKinnon's and Councillor Price's enthusiasm and optimism when it comes to the working circle. I think it's very, very well manned, and it's undertaking some issues that need to be resolved in our community. Very positive. Thanks for that, you guys.
All right, thank you. And Councillor Bush.
Just a couple of things. Councillor MacKinnon covered off what's going on in the working circle, and again, I'm very pleased to be a part of such a great group. We've talked a lot about what's going on downtown with respect to 20 King Street, but also just like to point out that we have an additional facelift going on with Dr. Lockyer. If you go by his building, you can see that he's preparing to put on an addition, which is great to see, and another addition to our downtown. And we had a master plan steering committee today, so just for the benefit of council, again, Councillor MacKinnon, Shane MacKinnon, and Councillor Price are on that with myself, as well as Roger Nesbitt and a number of other city staff. But we are continuing to meet and push the strategic plan forward, just so everybody in the public is aware of that. And you can see the results of some of those things through the website. And so at some point in the not too distant future, I'm sure we'll be bringing some reports to council with respect to progress and things that we need to be working on from a municipal perspective with our strategic plan.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Carlucci.
Thank you, Mayor Wilson. Just a couple of things. One, as well, thank you to the Dryden Fall Fest Committee. I missed their first two events. Not that I would attend the last one. It was kind of scary for me. But the next one's on Saturday, October 31st, 4 to 8. It's a trunk or treat. So bring the kiddies out to that. I was away for the past 2 weeks. I'm now the proud grandfather of my third grandchild, Noah John. Nice name, I think. So just nice that. But I'm back. Getting back in the swing of things, and there's a few meetings coming up. Not happy to be back to the snow. Leaving 25 degrees in Sault Ste. in Ottawa, coming back to snow is not a fun thing to do. And I just love hearing all the positive things, like the working circle, things that the city and its council and the staff is putting together. Just a really good thing for our city, and really glad to hear all that. So thank you to everyone for bringing that forward. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Carlucci, I think Noah's a great name too.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Bush.
Okay, so thinking of rising costs, we've been talking about rising costs tonight and probably every night. And just want the public to know that council is aware of the financial pressures constantly being put on taxpayers, on citizens. And this following notice was sent this month to the clerks of all the municipalities in which Enbridge Gas supplies gas. And it was a notice to customers basically saying they've applied to raise their natural gas rates effective the 1st of April 2021 to recover costs associated with the federal government's Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act. And I just thought I'd give a little bit of detail because it's hard to understand why we have less and less money every month in our bank account and every year. So basically, the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act establishes a carbon pricing program under which a natural gas utility in Ontario, such as Enbridge, who supplies us, is required to pay a carbon charge to the federal government for emissions from the natural gas that it delivers to its customers and for excess emissions from the operation of their natural gas distribution system. And so back in 2019, the federal carbon charge came into effect, so they increased it on April 1, 2020, and will increase it again in 2021. So a typical residential customer, if you're relying on natural gas, you'll see an annual bill increase of about roughly $43, just over. Rates for each fuel subject to the levy were the equivalent of $10 a ton on CO2 in 2018, and increased by $10 a ton annually to $50 per ton in 2022. So 10, and then jump up to 50. This charge has been referred to as a federal tax on carbon emissions from combusting fuel, and it's basically another tax that hits the consumers in the end, right? They tax the businesses, and then the businesses basically pass on those costs to the citizens. So citizens are already paying this tax every time they fuel up with their vehicle and when they heat their homes with natural gas, so be prepared for that biggest jump in fuel prices to happen in 2022. And this is another example of why your council and administration is doing its best to lobby senior level governments to quit picking on the taxpayers, and why we want to do everything we can to give you value for your tax dollars here at City Hall. And second comment, I received a call from a lady in Thunder Bay who left me a message on Saturday wanting to make a commendation to Dr. Bob Egley of the Hillcrest Animal Clinic. And she said, and I'll quote, "He's such a wonderful man who deserves a reward for what he does." So our staff let her know that she could contact the Chamber of Commerce and perhaps nominate him for one of the Chamber's annual Business Excellence Awards. And I don't know the details of how Dr. Egley helped this lady in pet distress, but I can speak from personal experience to the caring manner of both he and his wife, Anna, in working to look after our four-legged friends in towns and other types of pets. And a number of years ago, because it triggered some memories, my wife and I, we were driving to Thunder Bay and noticed it was possibly a dog, maybe a wild animal, and it looked like it must have been hit by a vehicle. It was not doing well, and it was about 40 kilometers east of Dryden, late at night, no houses around. So, you know, you think, well, what do you do? What can we do? And we just kept driving. So I happened to call the Egleys about a month later after seeing another animal struggling on the side of the road on Sandy Beach, and I'm sure it was hit. And when I told the Egleys of the earlier incident as we were talking, they said, "Hey, call us anytime, night or day, and we'll investigate, even if we have to travel 40 kilometers past Dryden." And of course, they live, maybe 20 kilometers the other side of Dryden. So we have two other veterinarian clinics in town, Trans-Canada Pet Clinic and the Dryden Vet Services, which I'm sure have similar love for our pets. And I just, think we should take some time to remember that Dryden is a caring town, lots of caring people in it, and I applaud our veterinarians tonight for all that they do for us. Hopefully not to us. So, Clerk, we need a confirmatory bylaw. Move and second.
Certainly. We're looking for someone to move and second the confirmatory bylaw this evening, please. Councillor Carlucci, Councillor Bush. Moved by Councillor Carlucci, seconded by Councillor Bush, that bylaw 473, 2020 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council be read the first, second, and third time.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And we need first and second mover for adjournment.
Oh boy, Councillor Martin MacKinnon and Councillor McKay. Moved by Councillor Martin MacKinnon, seconded by Councillor McKay. This meeting will be hereby adjourned.
All in favor? Carried. You're dismissed.